David Galbally is one of Melbourne's leading QCs, having worked on some of Australia's most high-profile and complex corporate and criminal cases over the years. Between 1974 and 83, David Galbally was a board member of the Collingwood Football Club. David has been critical of Eddie Maguire's presidency at the club and his 22-year reign. In fact, Mr Galbally believes that the time has come for Eddie Maguire to step down, and he's criticised Maguire's role within the club. And of course, he's also been most critical of a host of scandals and controversies that have not only affected the club, but have affected the presidency of one Eddie Maguire. David Galbally, welcome to The Informer.
Thank you.
Eddie has been, thank you. Eddie has been, as I touched on, president of the Collingwood Football Club since 1998.
It's a very long time to be president, and it's not necessarily in the best interests of the club. Even the President of the United States is limited to 2 terms of office of 4 years each. And the United States recognised when the Constitution was established that 8 years was a sufficient period of time to be there. And a change is required, because what's necessary for the club is to have new ideas, new approach, fresh approach. And a club can't get that if the same people are going to remain there forever and a day. So that's critically important.
He's notched up the longest tenure of any president in the club's long and storied history. Does that not give him any kudos?
Well, let me say this firstly. Eddie has been fantastic for the Collingwood Football Club. At the time he became president, Collingwood had great difficulty in getting decent sponsorship, in getting people to understand what sponsors were requiring, the money they were putting up, and Eddie understood all of that. And because of that, he was able to, if I can use the word, jettison the club out of the pack, up above everybody else. And he's been terrifically successful in that regard. But there does come a time when a person can be in a position for too long. And it's not in the interests of the club that that person remain there. It's not saying anything against Eddie. It's really just the fact that the club needs change at the top, needs fresh ideas, a fresh approach to both recruiting, sponsorship, and the way forward for the club.
I hear that, but where do you go? He's been there 22 years. Where do you take the club? Is it Mark Corder's turn to step up, or has he been there too long as well, being an able aide and number 2 at the Collingwood Football Club?
Oh, well, I'm firmly of the view that if an individual stands for the vice presidency of a football club or any organisation, they must be prepared and willing to take over the leadership and the helm of the club. So it may well be that Mark needs to step up and do exactly that. I served on the board at the Collingwood Football Club at a very young age, and one of the great problems that we had was that neither one of the vice presidents was prepared to put their hand up and take over as president. And that created a huge problem within the club. And what it did was it encouraged, if I can use the word, outsiders, that is people that haven't been on the board, to run for the purposes of taking over the club. And that's not necessarily in the best interests of the club. You need someone who's going to take over the club as president, who understands everything that's taken place in the past, understands how contracts were signed off on, and all of those intricacies. And therefore you need someone from within the board.
We're talking to David Galbally, who's a long-time Collingwood man. He's also one of the best credentialed QCs in Melbourne, and of course in Australia. Comes from a long line of legal men, and he's had a tremendous career. David, we're talking about your club and the challenges it's currently facing, and you've said it's time for Eddie to step down, and it's not because that he hasn't done a good job. I say to you once again, people see only what they want to see. And you said to me, that's the most important thing for people to understand. You're not criticising the man, you're criticising the fact that his tenure, 22 years, tremendous though it's been, it's time for something new, correct?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm in no way critical of what he's done, because he has taken Collingwood from nothing.
Yeah.
It had trouble getting sponsorships, and people on the board at the time that he took over didn't understand how to give sponsors value for money. Eddie did that. And what he's done with Collingwood has been absolutely fantastic. But it's not a lifetime appointment.
So what's next? We talk about Mark Corder, and we touched on him earlier, and you said, fine, let him step up. But he's also been part of the committee, part of the board that has found itself in this current situation where you've got fantastic players who've been handed back-ended deals so they could help the club. So the players have accepted that they would cop a smaller wage early on, but at the end of their careers, at the end of their contracts, they'd be getting some sizable money for their efforts. Suddenly, we've seen one of your stars, David Treloar, he's had to be jettisoned. That's not what any fan of the club wants to see, and I'm sure if you're the player list manager, that's also what you don't want to see. It doesn't fill you with any confidence.
Look, I can't argue with what you say, save to say this, that Mark Corder is a vice president. Yep. And has been on the board. We don't know, and we will never know, thank goodness, what deliberations have taken place within the boardroom. There could have been furious, heated argument about the way in which things were going to be done. We don't know that. Mark Corder and any other member of that board will never divulge that, because it's sacrosanct. It stays within those rooms and those four walls. So I'm very much of the view that he's put himself in the position that he's in as a vice president. And my view is that as a vice president, his role is to take over and be president. Now, I served on a board at Collingwood when I, the vice president, wanted to be president, and it was disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. And we had to persuade one of them, Gordon Carline, in the end, to run to be president. It was his obligation to be president. When Jock McHale was the senior vice president for years, do you think we could get Jock to the barrier to be president? No way. And I used to have huge arguments with him. And he would always say to me, because I was only 23 then, now, young Galbally, you've got to be seen and not heard.
David.
And I would say, oh, that's my mother talking to me.
David, let me ask you again, before we leave this. You say, Eddie, thank you very much for what you've done for the club. Time to go. Should it be a time for a total clean out? Or do we need for some of those who've done a fabulous job behind the scenes and continue to stay there to maybe carry the torch to the next generation of administrators?
I don't believe it should be a total clean out. I've been on the board at Collingwood when there was a total clean out. We need to keep the memories of what has transpired in the past, so that when things come up to be decided on, we have someone in that boardroom who can say, or one or more, look, the reason this took place was because of A, B, C, and D. You must understand that. And that's terribly important. I remember when I got on the board at Collingwood, we had a fellow on the board, Charlie Utting. Now, Charlie Utting was one of those that we'd targeted to get rid of, but he stayed on the board. He was invaluable. He was had a very close association with the Collingwood Council, and he ended up being mayor of Collingwood. But he was critical to the football club and to the board to keeping us at Victoria Park, to extending the ground. And so it was, thank goodness, Charlie stayed there. We were very fortunate.
Now, before I leave you, you've been a Collingwood man all your life. Why?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I suppose my father played, and we had Collingwood jumpers brought home from the '58 grand final, and my mother had to wash them out. He played. I had two uncles who played. I was sort of zoned to Collingwood, and I had a gig with the under-19s. And I suppose the other reason was I looked at careers and I saw that the law, if I became a barrister, had black and white roads. So I could be totally fulfilled by being black and white. And as I say to all my grandchildren, we are so tight, we are but black and white.
David Galbally, why did I know you were going to finish it so brilliantly? Can I just thank you once again for giving us your time. Stay healthy and stay true to the black and white. It's been an extraordinary commitment, both your family and yourself. And I think a lot of people will listen to your words, that the criticism about Eddie is not about what he's done, but that the time is right for a new seed and a new stream, a new blood. Thank you so much for joining us.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
All the best. David Galbally joining us on The Informer.